Clara's breath caught in her throat as Darian's form loomed closer, his silhouette cutting through the darkness. The dim glow from the house barely illuminated his menacing grin, but it was enough to send a cold shiver down her spine. Her pulse raced. She had hoped to stay out of this, hoped to remain hidden, safe within the walls of the house, while Riker fought to protect them both. But now Darian was coming for her, and there was nowhere to hide. The house, with its reinforced walls and locked doors, had become a sanctuary, but it wasn't invincible. She needed to act fast. Clara moved quickly, her mind racing as she calculated her next move. Riker was engaged in the battle outside, but with Darian approaching, she couldn't wait any longer. She grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, moving quickly toward the back door. She had to stop him, at least slow him down, long enough for Riker to return and finish what they had started. As she opened the door, a gust of icy wind hit her face, and the sounds of battle outside intensified. She could hear Riker's snarls, the thudding of heavy feet, the sounds of shifting. But Darian was closing in too quickly. Clara's breath was coming in shallow gasps, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the adrenaline pumping through her veins, her instincts sharpening. She stepped out onto the porch and into the yard, squinting into the darkness. And there, just beyond the trees, she saw him. Darian was moving with an eerie fluidity, his eyes glowing like twin embers, his posture poised and predatory. "You think you can stop me, little human?" Darian called out, his voice carrying easily through the night air. He sounded amused, his tone dripping with condescension. Clara's grip tightened around the flashlight. She wasn't going to let him intimidate her. "I'm not afraid of you," she shot back, her voice shaky but defiant. Darian's grin widened. "You should be." Before Clara could react, Darian lunged forward, his body shifting mid-air into something monstrous. His fox-like form was massive, more than twice the size of Riker in his shifter form. His fur was jet black, eyes glowing with a feral light. He landed with a thud, his claws digging into the earth as he advanced toward Clara. Clara took a step back, her breath catching in her throat as she realized just how much danger she was in. She needed to get back inside, to find a weapon or something to protect herself. But Darian was faster. He was already right in front of her. His breath hot and heavy, his massive form looming over her. Now, he said, his voice low and growling. "I think we both know there's nowhere for you to run." Clara's mind raced. She wasn't a fighter. She had no idea how to defeat someone like Darian. But one thing she had learned from Riker was to trust herself when it mattered most. She steadied her breath, her pulse thundering in her ears. Then, without thinking, she swung the flashlight at his face. It connected with a satisfying crack against his jaw, but the force of it did nothing to slow him down. Darian's eyes flicked with surprise, but it was only momentary. He laughed darkly, a sound that chilled her to her core. "You think that will stop me?" he sneered, licking his lips. "You're pathetic." But before he could move, the ground trembled beneath her feet. Clara's heart skipped a beat as she heard the deep growl from behind her. Riker! He appeared from the darkness, his massive, muscled form a blur of motion as he charged at Darian. Riker's eyes blazed with fury, his powerful frame glowing with an intense, almost otherworldly energy as he moved like lightning, his claws flashing. "Get away from her!" Riker's voice boomed, a savage growl rumbling in his chest. Clara barely had time to react before Riker collided with Darian, the force of their impact, sending the two of them tumbling to the ground. Clara stumbled backward, watching in wide-eyed awe as the two shifters grappled with each other. Riker was fierce, but Darian was equally formidable. The sounds of claws scraping against flesh and the grunting of strained muscles filled the air. She could feel the air thick with tension, charged with the energy of the fight. The ground beneath her feet trembled as the two shifters fought for dominance, their raw power radiating from them in waves. Clara knew this battle was only just beginning, and she had no idea how long it would last or how it would end. But she also knew one thing for certain. Riker wasn't going to let Darian win. He couldn't. Riker managed to get Darian in a headlock, but Darian wasn't backing down. With a vicious twist, he broke free, slamming Riker into the ground. Riker grunted in pain, but before Darian could strike, Clara rushed forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She grabbed the first thing she could find, a heavy garden tool, and swung it at Darian's back with all the strength she could muster. The blow landed with a sickening crack, and Darian howled in pain. Riker seized the moment, getting to his feet and launching himself at Darian. This time, Riker's attack was relentless, his body shifting into a more beastly form, his claws and teeth bared. The battle was a blur of movements, Riker's ferocity pushing Darian to the brink. The two of them were locked in a deadly dance, both determined to come out on top. Clara's hands trembled as she stood back, unable to do anything more but watch in horror. Then, just as Darian was about to land a devastating blow, a voice called out from the shadows. "Enough! Malric!" The other shifters who had been lurking in the trees suddenly stepped forward, their glowing eyes fixed on the scene. Malric's presence was commanding, and Clara felt a chill sweep through her as he surveyed the battlefield. The other shifters stood at the ready, waiting for his command. Riker's gaze flicked to Malric, his body tense with rage. "You're wasting your time, Malric. You won't take her. You won't take anyone." Malric's lips curled into a cruel smile. "We'll see about that, Riker. You can't run forever." The tension was thick in the air, and Clara felt as if the entire world was about to explode. She couldn't just stand there. She had to act. "Riker, we can't let them win," she said, her voice steady despite the panic she felt inside. Riker's eyes met hers, filled with a mix of determination and something else, something almost vulnerable. He stepped back, his form shifting back into a more human shape as he stood tall, unbowed by the overwhelming odds. "We won't," he said, his voice low but resolute. "We fight, and we fight until the end." The air felt thick with tension as Clara stood in front of the window, staring out at the forest that stretched beyond the property. Riker was still outside, checking the perimeter. Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that despite everything they'd done to keep themselves hidden, the danger wasn't over. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to find comfort in the familiarity of the house. But the memories of last night, of the battle, and the raw intensity of what they'd fought for weighed heavily on her. Riker had almost been killed. He had fought with everything in him to protect her. But there had been moments, brief but terrifying, when Darian and Malric had nearly overpowered him. She had seen the fear in his eyes, and it had shaken her. Clara turned from the window and made her way back to the living room, where Riker had placed a few bags of supplies they had scavenged from town. She hadn't seen him this tense in a long time, and that only made her more anxious. He was usually so calm, so in control. But now he was different. She couldn't help but feel a deep concern for him. She heard a soft knock at the door, and Clara's heart skipped a beat. Had Malrix again? Her hand instinctively went to the small knife Riker had given her, her fingers wrapping tightly around the handle as she approached the door. She opened it slowly. To her surprise, it wasn't Malric or his pack. It was one of Riker's old friends, a shifter named Kale. His sharp eyes scanned the house quickly, making sure no one was following him before he stepped inside. He was tall, his features lean and sharp like a predator, and his expression was serious. "Riker's out there?" Kale asked, his voice low and steady. Clara nodded, stepping aside to let him in. "He's been out there since dawn. He's worried. We both are." Kyle's gaze softened for a moment, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "It's not over, Clara. We both know that. The fight has only just begun." Her heart sank. She hadn't wanted to admit it, but Kyle's words echoed the feeling that had been gnawing at her for days. The battle with Darian and Malric wasn't the end. It was just a warning, a taste of the storm that was coming. "Do you think they'll come again?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kale's expression darkened. "I know they will. Malric won't stop until he gets what he wants. And you?" He hesitated, his gaze flicking over her. "You're part of that." Clara took a step back, trying to process what Kyle was saying. "What do you mean? I don't have any power over what's going on here. I'm just trying to stay alive." Kyle's eyes narrowed. "You have more power than you think, Clara. You just don't know it yet." Before she could ask more, she heard Riker's footsteps approaching. He entered the room, his face grim, but with an edge of determination in his eyes. "Kale," Riker greeted, his voice rough. "Did you bring the supplies?" Kale nodded and placed the bags down on the table. He then turned to Riker, his gaze flicking to Clara before meeting his friend's eyes. "The pack is regrouping. They're planning something bigger. Malric's not backing down." Riker's jaw clenched. "I figured as much. They'll come after us again. We'll need to be ready." Clara watched them, a sense of unease creeping over her. Riker and Kyle were speaking in cryptic terms, as if they were both privy to some larger plan that Clara wasn't part of. She wasn't used to feeling like an outsider, especially in her own life. "I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "What's happening, Riker? Why is Malric so determined to find me?" Riker sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "I didn't want you involved in this, Clara. But Malric, he wants you, not just as a pawn. He needs you for something more, something that could give him ultimate control over the shifter world." Clara felt a cold shiver run down her spine. "What could I possibly have that he needs?" Kale stepped forward, his expression serious. "It's your blood, Clara. Your connection to Riker. The two of you together. There's a power in that bond. It's rare. And Malric believes that with that power, he can bend the shifter world to his will. He believes that with you, he can control all the packs." Clara's stomach churned at the thought. She was just a human, a woman trying to live her life. And now, she was the target of a deadly game between shifters. Riker had tried to protect her from this truth, but now there was no denying it. "Riker, we need to get out of here," Clara said, her voice shaking with the weight of the revelation. "We can't stay here. Not when they're looking for me." Riker's face softened, and for a moment he looked torn. But then his resolve hardened, and he shook his head. Leaving won't stop them, Clara. They'll just follow us. And I won't let them hurt you. Cale watched the two of them silently before stepping back. You're both right. They won't stop until they get what they want. But it's not just about running anymore. We need to make a stand. We need allies, Riker. There's more to this than just you and her. You need to gather your allies, or Malric will tear us apart. Riker's gaze darkened. You think I don't know that? I've been trying to protect her, protect all of us. But I can't do this alone. We'll have to find a way to end this once and for all. But Clara, you need to trust me. Trust that I'll keep you safe. Clara swallowed, her heart heavy with the weight of everything she had learned in the past few days. I trust you, Riker. I just don't know if I'm strong enough for what's coming. Riker reached out, his hand cupping her cheek gently. His touch was warm, grounding her amidst the chaos swirling around them. You are, Clara. You're stronger than you think. And together, we can face whatever comes next. But as Riker spoke those words, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was only just beginning.